The deal is you can't pick up one end of the stick without picking up the other. If you choose to have sex, you might be choosing the possibility of pregnancy or whatever else is gonna come on the other end of that stick. Hi there, in this video, we're going to talk about how to teach your kids about teen pregnancy. And this video is a part of a series where we talk to parents and we teach them and give them resources that they need to be able to show their teens different paths and roads that they can take or that they can choose to take in life. The idea for the whole series is that kids have a desire to be on a certain path, right? They have goals. This is where they might want to end up in life, and this is their path. But sometimes they find themselves on a completely different path without even realizing it. At first, they're jumping back and forth between the two paths, right? And that's easy to do. But as the paths widen and grow farther and farther apart, they find that the path that they actually wish they were on is very far out of reach from where they actually are at. My hope is that if we can open kids' eyes to the paths that are optional for them, we can track backwards and show them the steps that it takes to be on that path, whether it's positive or negative. That way kids can get a very real view, a very clear picture of how the choices that they make right now affect their future. And that's what I refer to as the end of the road, or where they will be at when they grow up. Because if kids can see all of their choices, then they're more likely to make a good choice. The very first video in this series goes into this a little bit more, and I'll link it in the description below if you guys want to check it out. To get a glimpse of teen pregnancy, kids have to be able to do two things. They have to be able to envision or picture what life would really be like as a teen parent, or what life would be like and the emotions that you would go through giving a baby up for adoption. And number two, kids need to be able to see the steps that were taken to be able to get to the end of that road. Because I'll tell you right now that most teens did not plan on getting pregnant. I for sure didn't. Below this video, I'm going to give you some resources to help you and your teens take a look at really glimpsing that life. But as also part of this video, I'm going to share with you my story and how I found myself a teenage mom. Now, I'm really gonna tell you what happened to me. But I hope with all of my heart that you watch this video because you want to teach your kids. When I was 14 years old, I took a pregnancy test in the side bathroom of a gas station. It was positive. The test was stolen, not by me, but by the guy waiting on the other side of the door to also find out the results. That guy was my boyfriend at the time. He was my first, and he told me he was sterile, and I believed him. I also believed and leaned into a lot of other things that he told me. Okay, the rule at my house was you couldn't even date guys until you were 16. So what in heaven's name was I doing in a gas station holding a pregnancy test? The first day anything really happened was senior sleff day. I left school with a bunch of my friends and they dropped me off at his house, my boyfriend's house. I laid down by him. We were just watching TV. He was laying behind me. He started to move, and he started to move until his parts were touching my parts. Wait, hold up. The most important thing for you to know is that this first moment was a baby step. Just a quick, short baby step. I was shocked. That had never happened to me, and as he could feel and see my reaction, he told me that it was totally fine because we still had our clothes on and they were just saying hi. He literally told me, they're just saying hello. Red flag. How many can you see? These are the reasons that I tell my kids, don't be alone in a bedroom or in a house for that matter with somebody from the opposite sex, like with one other person. Vertical, 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 never horizontal. And possibly the biggest red flag of them all is the reasoning, the justification, and the manipulation that he used. It's okay. We still have our clothes on. They're just saying hi. No way. No way. This is why we have to teach our kids these things, that people are going to say things and try to manipulate you. I left. I was rattled. I remember going with my friends and telling them about it. We went over to one of my friends' houses and we found ourselves sitting in the kitchen. We were sitting around like on the countertops in her kitchen We were the only ones home again, and we chatted until the conversation evolved into a couple of them educating us that you can't get pregnant just by a guy sticking his penis inside of you, that he would actually have to release sperm for you to get pregnant. The messages I got from my friends did not talk me into a state of reason, and furthermore, they were not correct. You can get pregnant by using the pull-out method, along with an entire host of STDs that would also largely affect your life. Our kids need to know that the information that comes from other kids is most often not correct. Each time I was around my boyfriend, things would progress a little bit more. And as he could see that I was uncomfortable with it, he would tell me things like, Mesha, if you really love someone, it's okay. And things like, I wish you could talk to my mom about this. She told me that her religious leader had told her that if you really love someone, then you should express those feelings to them and that it's okay. And don't worry, you won't get pregnant. I'm sterile. To which he then taught me what that even meant. P.S. He wasn't sterile, and he knew it because he had another kid that he had never told me about. And hey, why don't we just talk to your mom about that? Duh, because you know she wouldn't say that. When I say these things to you out loud, I know they sound ridiculous. But sometimes we have a reason or a desire to believe what the other person is saying, and so we allow those things to make sense in our mind. These are the reasons why we need to prepare our kids and tell them things that are possible, ways of manipulation and justification. I mean, that piled on top of the fact that they might be young and naive, it's really hard to decipher through like brain games in your mind. My experience included manipulation to get me to where I was comfortable to disregard what I knew inside. The month after we started sleeping together, I was pregnant. The messages that I was getting from him were loud, and the messages that I was getting from my friends were not helpful either. This is why I say that it's so important that parents have a strong voice, like in their kids' lives. We can make our voices funny at times and tender at times, but the important thing is that we're talking to them, that we're exposing them to things like this, and that we're creating a safe place for our kids to talk. Also, listen, don't let your kids dictate what you talk about. Don't let them guide all the conversations, because you have to be a step ahead of them. You have to be like thinking on your toes and thinking like, okay, if this is where they're at, then this is kind of what they need to hear, right? And if you have any trouble talking to your kids about sex, then check out the recent video that I just did. It's all about that. It's all about talking to your kids about sex and having these open conversations. I'll put a link to it in the description below. One thing that I think parents should never be afraid to express to their kids is their desires for them and their sex life. My desire is for my kids to practice abstinence until their marriage. So a lot of my advice will rotate around that approach. I teach them that both for religious reasons and because I'm also completely sure that kids are not mature and ready for that to be a part of their relationship when they're young. They're just not fully mature enough yet to handle the stress or the emotions that come with bringing sexuality into a relationship. And we'll talk about more of that in a minute, but I also have this firm belief that learning this type of self-control in their youth contributes to the type of self-control that they can have throughout their whole life. And even though that I teach my kids about abstinence, it doesn't mean that I don't teach them about condoms and STDs and dual protection. But listen up, this is the way that I do it. I talk to them in a way that says, look, this is just information that you're going to need to know, and it's also information that's going to allow you to be a voice of reason. If your friends are sitting around talking like mine were that day in the kitchen, it will allow you to be a person who does know what you're talking about, and you can give your friends sound advice. I teach my kids that condoms are only 82% effective, and that one form of birth control really isn't enough. You've got to have dual protection, right? 2 forms of birth control. And for most of kids, if they know that dual protection is something that they would want to use, it actually removes them from the situation enough to figure that out and to make a decision that might not be necessarily made in the heat of the moment. When I got pregnant, I decided to keep the baby, and because of that, I went to an alternative high school. And being at this alternative high school, I got to know the women and their stories. I remember many of them told me that they got pregnant using condoms. One of them even specifically told me, I'm not sure, maybe it slipped off. Guess what? Maybe that was the guy's intention all along. That is something that as a young girl, I never would have known. I wouldn't have understood that wearing a condom makes the experience completely different for a guy, and they probably don't prefer it. So, it accidentally slipping off during sex might not be truly an accident. But kids, again, they don't know those things. That's why we have to talk to them and tell them these types of things openly as their parents. I tell my kids things like back rubs in the front room lead to front rubs in the back room, and hands don't go where grandma's swimsuit goes, and no blankets during movies. And if you feel like you have to have sex or anything along those lines with someone to keep them in a relationship, they're not your person. Don't linger in cars. And of course, I told you guys the ones vertical, 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 never horizontal. And don't be alone with one person of the opposite sex in a house or a bedroom. Those are some really great ground rules. Another thing that I think kids really need to understand is that boys are like a microwave and girls are like a crock pot. And you've got to tell them why. You've got to explain to them that boys get excited so much faster than girls. And girls need to understand that if they mess around with a guy, for a guy, it means something completely different than it does for a girl. And guys need to understand that they're gonna have a lot more sexual energy to deal with. Obviously, they're both gonna have it, but guys just have more. And they need to figure out good ways of handling that energy. And if you guys want to figure out those ways of teaching your kids good ways of handling that energy, you can also refer to my video, again, the one that I did about talking to your kids about sex. We go all into that. I'll link it in the description below. The deal is you can't pick up one end of the stick without picking up the other. If you choose to have sex, you might be choosing the possibility of pregnancy or whatever else is gonna come on the other end of that stick. To really be able to picture this, kids need to be able to get a glimpse and really put themselves in the shoes of teen parents, to be able to think about what that would be like for them. It's great to ask them questions to be able to evoke some of those thoughts. It's also good to ask them questions about the difference between a teen parent and a mature parent, and talk about emotional intelligence and how that helps you raise kids. Or you can talk about what it would be like to give a child up for adoption and the emotions that someone goes through when they've done that, both in the moment as a teen and then later on as adults as they look back at those experiences. A couple of the resources below that I have linked for you are news clips interviewing teen parents, real teen parents. And there's also information about a movie called Gimme Shelter. When I went to that movie, I literally sobbed and sobbed. It took me back to the place where I was as a teen girl who took my baby to school, to that alternative high school with her on my hip. It really made me think about the people who were at that school, who helped us, who taught us, and who were mentors to us, and who cheered us through life, who helped us to try to get back on a good path where we could actually graduate high school, which was super hard considering the addition that we had to our life. They knew that just graduating high school would be really hard for us. Every single thing as a teen mom is hard. It would be really easy for someone to look at me and say, well, look, she turned out fine. I can do the same thing. But I'm telling you right now, it is hard to see the struggle of what really went down. Every single teen parent will tell you what they missed out on, and even more, the fight and the struggle that it was to just stay in the game and to juggle all of the balls that you have to juggle. And you're doing it with the maturity of a young mind versus being a really mature person, trying to handle all those things in your path. For me, I was really lucky because I actually had a family who really supported me. There was a big chunk of time where I didn't live in the same city as them when my daughter was a baby, and that was tough. It was hard stuff. And it was still hard when I was around my family. But for me and for my heart, I knew that that's what I was supposed to do. I knew that I was supposed to keep her, and that was my path. The thing that's tricky about that path for me, I always say to look at the struggle of where it took someone to get from this path clear over to the next path. For me, it's tricky because after 9 months, after my daughter had been alive for 9 months, she'd passed away. And so my role quickly switched from being a teen parent into loss and grief. And so my role and my life is very different to sort of look at the end of that road. But I do know that it's not easy to get your feet back underneath you after being in some of those situations. And I'm really grateful for the people who were there and who were rocks for me, as I'm sure every single teen parent is out there. It's just easier to try to live your life in a way where family planning is a decision and not a result of a heated moment. For exposure to this path, you guys can check out the resources that I've linked below. They are awesome. And you can also type into Google how to volunteer to help teen moms in your area. And you could get a real hands-on life experience from it. Hopefully by doing this, you can help your kids see the reality of what is down the path of choosing to sleep with someone in high school. And at the same time, help increase your teens' compassion towards people that this does happen to in life, like throughout their life, right? Parents, great job for doing what you can to be more involved in your kid's life, even if it's just you learning about it so that it affects your conversations. Keep going. I will put a link to all the videos that we do in this series in the description below, as I think that they really will help you spell out lots of different choices for your kids, both positive and negative, and help open their eyes to see that the choices that they make today really do matter. I'm excited to go down this path and help you guys have more power in your parenting. I'll see you guys soon.